Yo guys, what's up? My name is Djaji Prime. Welcome to another episode of Africa, the Motherland. Today we're going to be discussing the Republic of Burundi. Now, Burundi is a small landlocked francophone country which is situated in East Africa's Great Lakes region. Now, Burundi was once a part of the Kingdom of Rwanda-Urundi, which consisted, of course, of Burundi and its neighbor Rwanda. This kingdom was once part of German East Africa, but after the events of World War I was then transferred into the hands of the Belgians. Now, following independence on the 1st of July 1962, Burundi and Rwanda sort of parted ways and became separate nations. Despite this, Burundi and Rwanda share a pretty close relationship, a relationship which I'll be going on about later on in this video. Now, despite being a small country, Burundi has a population of about 11 million people. Its capital, Bujumbura, which was formerly known as Usumbura, of course this name was changed at independence, was once the administrative capital of Rwanda-Urundi. Bujumbura is the country's largest city and also functions as a port of the country's largest export, coffee, as well as cotton and tin. Moving on to the geography of Burundi. Burundi is bordered by the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and Tanzania, and is one of the smallest countries in terms of land area in the world, ranking as the 147th largest country in the world. Now, the country has an equatorial climate and its terrain is made up of mostly hills and mountains with a few plateaus and plains. Moving on to the flag of Burundi. Burundi's flag is divided by a white diagonal cross into red and green panels with a white disc superimposed at the center bearing 3 red 6-pointed stars outlined in green arranged in a triangular design, 1 star above and 2 stars below. The green represents hope and optimism. White is representative of purity and peace, and the red color represents the bloodshed in the struggle for independence. The 3 stars in the disc represent the 3 major ethnic groups: the Hutu, the Twa, and the Tutsi. Now, it is believed that the Twa, which is one of the ethnic groups in Burundi, were the original inhabitants of the present-day area that is Burundi. Burundi's history, however, is filled with a lot of conflict, coups, and wars. The area housing present-day Burundi was once a kingdom known as the Kingdom of Burundi, which existed from about the 16th century till 1966. It was led primarily by Tutsi kings, and the ruler was known as Mwami. Now, going on to elaborate further, when the Europeans, mainly the Germans and the Belgians, came to Burundi, they ruled the area via proxy, meaning they ruled the area via the Tutsi kings. Now, going on further on that, this rule via proxy further enforced the disparity between Hutus and Tutsis, and it made the Tutsis more powerful than the Hutus. Now, another thing to note is that when the Belgians came, they were measuring various facial features such as the nose and mouth and using that as sort of a classification or a distinction between the Hutu and the Tutsis. From independence till 1966, Burundi operated as a constitutional monarchy. The monarchy was disposed in a coup of 1966. However, an earlier coup which was orchestrated in October of 1965 failed. It was led by a Hutu-dominated police. Now, the Tutsi-dominated army then proceeded to purge their ranks of Hutus and carried out reprisal attacks, claiming about 5,000 lives. Now, Rwanda and Burundi are sort of similar countries in terms of their makeup and sort of in their fate. Both these countries have suffered from genocides, which I think I'll need to create a video just specifically dedicated to the Burundian and Rwandan genocide, so I'll do that later on. Also, in 2015, there was conflict and protests and riots in Burundi following the attempts of the President Nkurunziza for a 3rd term. Those attempts were indeed successful and he was able to amend the constitution. Moving on to government and politics in Burundi. Burundi now is a presidential republic, and its legal system is basically a mixture of Belgian civil law and more traditional Burundian law. There is no citizenship by birth, and your father must be a citizen of Burundi for you to be a Burundian citizen. However, citizenship via naturalization is possible after living in the country for 10 years. Also, dual citizenship is not recognized by Burundi. The chief of state and head of government of Burundi is the president, and the current president of Burundi is Pierre Nkurunziza. He has been president since August 26, 2005. He is a former Hutu rebel and leader of the Hutu National Council for the Defense of Democracy, Forces for the Defense of Democracy. He was elected unopposed by the parliament on the 19th of August 2005. A person can become president of Burundi after winning an absolute majority in the presidential elections, which may sometimes go into 2 rounds, to serve for 5 years. The president is responsible for nominating his cabinet and also 2 vice presidents who need to be approved by both chambers of parliament. Now, the first VP is responsible for political and administrative affairs, and the position is currently held by Gaston Sidimwo. The second VP is responsible for economic and social affairs, and this position is currently being held by Joseph Butore. Now, there's sort of a power sharing within this. One VP has to be ethnically Hutu and the other has to be ethnically Tutsi. Burundi, as I implied earlier, is a bicameral parliamentary system which is made up of a Senate which has 49 seats. Within these 49 seats, there are certain quota which must be met. 34 members are elected indirectly via electoral college. 4 seats are reserved for former presidents, 3 seats are reserved for the ethnic Twas, and 8 seats are reserved for women. The National Assembly has 121 seats, with 100 members being elected directly, 3 seats being reserved for the Twa, and 18 seats being reserved for women. Now, moving on to the people and culture of Burundi. Now, the main ethnic identities in Burundi are the Hutus, which form 85% of the population, and the Tutsis, which form about 14%. There's also the Twa, which form 1%, and Europeans and South Asians. The main languages spoken in Burundi are Kirundi, French, Swahili, and English. Now, Hutu and Tutsi are the main ethnic groups in Burundi. However, despite the Hutu and Tutsi being considered as separate ethnic groups, they essentially speak the same language, Rwanda-Rundi, which is divided into dialects Kinyarwanda and Kirundi for Rwanda and Burundi respectively, and also have a history of intermarriage and similar cultural characteristics. The main defining difference between Hutus and Tutsis lies in their occupations. The Hutus are considered as agricultural people, whereas the Tutsis are the cattle-owning elite. Now, as I said earlier, the colonialists, when they came to Burundi, ruled the region via proxy through the Tutsi leaders. Also, a requirement put in place by the Belgians in 1933 requiring all Burundians to indicate their tribal identity on their ID cards furthered the divide between Hutus and Tutsis. However, despite this, craft forms a major part of Burundian culture, with basket weaving being a popular craft, as well as masks, shields, statues, and pottery. There's also a heavy influence on music and dance within Burundian culture. Moving on to the economy of Burundi. Burundi doesn't have a very vibrant or booming economy. It is a landlocked country which is rather poor in terms of resources and has a very underdeveloped manufacturing sector. Agriculture accounts for 40% of GDP and employs over 90% of the country's population. Burundi's primary exports are coffee and tea, which account for about 90% of its foreign exchange. However, being that these are agricultural products, they rely heavily on weather conditions and the international costs of coffee and tea. Burundi is also reeling from decades of war and conflict and has a high poverty rate, poor education, and a weak legal system. Burundi's currency is the Burundian franc, and its main export partners are Germany, Pakistan, the DRC, Uganda, Sweden, Belgium, and Rwanda. Now, speaking briefly on the relationship between the neighbors Burundi and Rwanda, they don't have the most cordial relationship, and you notice that both governments tend to accuse each other of sort of funding and financing their respective countries' opposition. Despite this, Burundi is a country with an interesting culture and a very interesting history. Despite being small in size and despite going through decades of conflict, there is still hope on the horizon for Burundi. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something about Burundi. I know I certainly did, and I never expected to have this much information on Burundi. But definitely be sure to check out more information. I'll leave links in the description about Burundi. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to leave a like. If you're new around here, why not click subscribe? My name is Djaji Prime. I hope you have a blessed day, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.